The challenge the alien arena was huge, carved into the side of a black mountain. Thousands of alien spectators filled the stands, their glowing eyes fixed on the center. They came to watch the strange human fight and lose Dot in the middle of the arena. Stood Captain Ryan, alone. He wore a plain black suit with scratches from earlier battles. In his right hand, he held a small, strange-looking weapon. It was no bigger than a book. There were no sharp edges, no glowing lights, nothing impressive about it. Across from him stood the alien warlord. He was twice as tall as Ryan, with thick armor covering his body and a massive sword in his hands. His scales shone like bronze. In the sunlight, the warlord let out a laugh that echoed around the arena. The crowd roared with him. "You call that a weapon?" The warlord sneered, pointing at the small device in Ryan's hand. "That little toy?" Ryan didn't answer. He just looked at the warlord with calm, cold eyes. The warlord laughed again, louder this time. "Pathetic. This is what Earth sends to fight me. A weak man with a weak weapon?" The crowd started to chant something in their alien language. The sound was deafening. Many of them waved flags or banged on drums. The energy in the air was wild. Ryan slowly turned his head and looked up at the stands. Thousands of aliens stared down at him, their faces full of amusement. Some threw small stones at his feet. Others hissed, but he didn't flinch. He simply checked his weapon, turning it over in his hand, as if making sure it was ready. The warlord walked closer, his heavy boots shaking the ground. He raised his massive sword high and shouted, "I will end you with one strike, and then I will burn your planet to ash." Ryan still said nothing. The warlord tilted his head. "Nothing to say, little human? No final words before you die?" Ryan finally raised his eyes to meet the warlord's. He smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You'll see," he said quietly. The warlord blinked, confused for just a second. Then he threw back his head and roared with laughter again. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. "Today, the final trial begins. If the human survives, his people will go free. If he falls, Earth becomes our slave forever." The crowd cheered wildly. The sound of drums grew louder. Dust rose into the air as the ground trembled. Ryan stood still, his feet firmly planted, his grip on the weapon steady. Behind the warlord, a group of alien soldiers stood in formation, ready to jump in if needed. Each carried sharp blades or glowing rifles. All of them looked at Ryan like he was already dead. The warlord lowered his sword and took one step closer. His breath was hot and smelled like burned metal. He leaned down so his face was inches from Ryan's. "I almost feel sorry for you," the warlord said, grinning. "But rules are rules, and I love crushing hope." Ryan didn't move. He didn't even blink. The warlord straightened up and raised his sword high into the air. The crowd screamed and stomped their feet. Ryan took a deep breath and looked down at the small device in his hand. The surface was smooth and dark, with faint lines etched into it. At the center was a single round button. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then he looked back up at the warlord and spoke again, his voice low but firm. "You really shouldn't have underestimated us." The warlord narrowed his eyes. Like before, he could reply. The announcer shouted, "Begin." A loud horn blasted. The ground vibrated as the fight officially started. The warlord wasted no time. He swung his sword with incredible speed, aiming right for Ryan's chest. The blade cut through the air, humming with deadly energy. Ryan didn't move. He simply held up the small weapon in his hand, pressing his thumb gently on the button. And then, nothing happened. The warlord stopped mid-swing, confused. The crowd went silent for a moment. Then they burst out laughing. The warlord chuckled, lowering his sword just slightly. "Is that it?" he mocked. "You press a button and nothing happens? What kind of joke is this?" Ryan looked at him calmly, still, holding the weapon up. But in his eyes there was no fear, only confidence. The warlord growled and raised his sword again. "Fine. Let me show you what a real weapon looks like." He swung with all his strength. Ryan's thumb pressed the button a second time, and this time something began to change. The air around them shimmered, as though heat was rising from the ground. A strange, low hum filled the arena. The earth beneath their feet started to vibrate, stronger and stronger. The warlord froze, mid-swing, staring at the weapon in Ryan's hand. For the first time, there was doubt in his eyes. Ryan gave him the faintest of smiles. "You'll see," he repeated, and the arena fell silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The past long before the arena, long before the laughter of the alien crowd. There was a dark night on Earth when everything changed. Captain Ryan stood alone on a ruined hill, watching the remains of New York City burn. The air was thick with smoke, and the sky glowed red with fire. Ships, alien ships, hovered silently above the city, like giant black knives cutting through the clouds. Their weapons had torn through buildings as if they were paper. On that night, humanity learned how small it really was. The first attack came without warning. They arrived in the skies, unleashed their weapons, and left millions dead in a single day. Every army that tried to fight back was crushed. Their bullets and bombs were useless against the alien shields. People hid underground. Soldiers fell back. Governments begged for mercy. But not Ryan. On that burning hill, he swore he would find a way to fight back, no matter what it took. Ryan wasn't a scientist. He wasn't a genius. He was a soldier. But he knew how to watch, how to learn, and how to wait. When the aliens began rounding up humans as slaves, Ryan allowed himself to be captured. They threw him into one of their prison camps, deep in the mountains of Siberia. There, he watched them more closely. He studied the way their weapons glowed when fired. He memorized the sound of their shields activating. He listened when they spoke to each other, quietly learning pieces of their strange language. Months passed in the freezing darkness. Other prisoners lost hope. Some even betrayed each other just to stay alive. But Ryan waited. And then, one bitter night, a strange thing happened. He was cleaning the floor of an alien workshop when he noticed something left behind on a bench, a small shard of alien metal, pulsing faintly with blue light. No one was watching. He slipped it into his sleeve. That shard became the first piece of his plan. Over the next year, Ryan found more scraps. A broken power cell, a fragment of alien circuitry, a strange crystal that hummed when he touched it. Each night, hidden under the floorboards of his prison cell, he assembled the pieces. His hands were rough and clumsy compared to the aliens. But he worked with care. He taught himself how their energy flowed, how their weapons worked, and how their shields could fail. It wasn't just about building something deadly. It was about building something they couldn't understand, something only a human could make. The first test was quiet. Late one night, he pressed the button on the tiny device he'd made. At first, nothing happened. Then a thin beam of light shot out and carved through a thick steel wall like it was butter. Ryan smiled for the first time in months, but he didn't stop there. He added more to it. A pulse field that could knock enemies off their feet. A frequency that disrupted alien armor. A way to turn their energy shields back on themselves. He worked until his fingers bled, and still, he waited. Then came the day of the announcement. The alien warlord declared he would hold a public challenge in the arena. One human would fight him. If the human won, Earth would go free. If not, humanity would serve the aliens forever. Most humans thought it was just a cruel game, a trick, but Ryan saw it for what it was, an opportunity. He volunteered immediately. The warlord laughed when he saw him step forward. "This is your champion?" the warlord mocked. "This small creature? This fragile thing?" Ryan didn't answer. On the day of the challenge, as the alien guards led him into the arena, he kept his hand tight around the small weapon he had built. He could feel it humming faintly, alive, almost as if it had a will of its own now. What the aliens didn't know was this: that weapon wasn't just made to win a fight. It was made to send a message. A message to every human watching Dot. We are not weak. We are not broken. We are not finished. Dot in the tunnels below the arena. Ryan walked past giant statues of alien warriors, past guards who sneered at him, past prisoners who looked at him with hopeless eyes. He stopped once, in front of a cracked mirror. He stared at himself, tired, scarred, thinner than he had been before, and tightened his grip on the weapon. "This ends today," he whispered Dot, and for a brief second, his reflection seemed to smile back at him, as though it already knew what he was about to do. Dot, when he stepped into the light of the arena, the crowd erupted in cruel laughter. The alien warlord towered over him, sword in hand, sure of his victory. But Ryan only looked up at him calmly. The past year of pain, of silence, of waiting, it all burned quietly inside him now. He raised his weapon slightly, and his voice carried across the arena. "You'll see." Above him, the alien ships hovered in the sky. Watching Dot below him, the earth seemed to hum faintly, as if it too was waiting. And deep in his pocket, the weapon glowed brighter than ever before. The past had brought him here, and he was ready. The first strike, the arena floor cracked under the weight of the warlord's boots as he moved forward. His sword glowed like molten steel, and the air around him shimmered with heat. Above them, the alien ships hung silently, their dark shadows stretching across the ground. Captain Ryan stood still, the strange little weapon in his hand. He did not flinch, even when the warlord's blade scraped against the stone floor, sending sparks flying toward his feet. For a long, tense moment, neither of them moved, and the warlord spoke, his deep voice booming. "Begin," he growled. Chaos followed. The warlord swung his sword with terrifying speed, faster than a creature of his size should have been able to move. The blade sliced through the air, aiming to cut Ryan in half with one strike. Ryan pressed the button. Nothing happened. The crowd burst into laughter again. The warlord's eyes flashed with cruel delight as his blade came closer, close enough that Ryan could feel the heat on his skin. Then, at the very last second, Ryan moved, not back, but forward. He ducked under the blade, rolled across the ground, and came up behind the warlord. Before the alien could turn, Ryan pressed the button again, and this time, the air screamed. A sharp, invisible wave of energy shot outward from the device, and the ground beneath the warlord's feet cracked and buckled. Dust and stones rose into the air as the shock wave expanded in every direction. The crowd gasped. The warlord staggered, his sword scraping against the floor as he struggled to keep his balance. Ryan stood in the center of the growing storm, his weapon humming louder, now its faint glow turning into a dangerous blue light. "What is that?" The warlord snarled, trying to steady himself, but Ryan didn't answer. Suddenly, from the far side of the arena, alien soldiers rushed in, dozens of them. Their armor glowed, their rifles sparking with energy. They formed a line and opened fire, streams of burning plasma streaking across the arena toward Ryan. Ryan pressed the button again. This time, a dome of shimmering energy appeared around him. The alien plasma struck it and scattered into harmless sparks. As though the air itself had turned solid. The crowd fell silent. Even the warlord stopped moving for a moment. His confidence cracking just a little, Ryan lowered the shield and took a step forward, the weapon still humming softly in his hand. The soldiers hesitated. They glanced at each other, unsure what to do. Ryan pressed the button once more, and the weapon emitted a high-pitched whine that grew louder and louder. Then, with a deafening crack, the rifles in the soldiers' hands exploded, one after another, as if some invisible force had turned their own energy against them. Sparks and smoke filled the air. The soldiers screamed and fell back, throwing down their useless weapons. The warlord roared in rage, but this time it sounded forced. Ryan advanced, step by step, and with each press of the button, something new happened. The ground shook under the warlord's feet. The air rippled with heat and light. The alien armor cracked and shattered like thin glass. Warlord raised his massive sword and charged again. But as he swung, Ryan activated the weapon's next mode. A single narrow beam of energy shot out, slicing clean through the warlord's blade. The sword fell to the ground in two pieces, glowing red at the edges. The warlord froze, staring at his broken weapon. In disbelief, the crowd, which had been cheering moments ago, was now completely silent. But Ryan didn't stop. He pressed the button again, and this time the entire arena seemed to shift. The stones underfoot glowed faintly, strange lines of light crawling across the floor in a pattern no one had ever seen before. The warlord staggered back as his armor began to spark and burn. He shouted something in his alien tongue, a command, a plea, but no soldiers came to help him now. Ryan's weapon hummed louder, and the glow spread further, climbing the walls of the arena, reaching toward the stands. The crowd began to panic. Some aliens tried to run. Others simply stood and stared, as the air itself seemed to come alive with invisible power. Ryan raised the weapon high. "You wanted to see what it could do," he said calmly, his voice carrying across the arena. Warlord backed away, his eyes wide now, his once proud face showing something no one thought possible: fear. "So watch." Ryan finished, and he pressed the button one last time. Got the ground beneath the warlord's feet split open with a sound like thunder. A column of light shot upward, swallowing him in a blinding glow. When it faded, the warlord was on his knees, his armor shattered, his skin burned, his massive hands shaking. Ryan stood above him, the weapon quiet again in his hand. He looked down at the warlord and spoke softly, almost kindly. "You call that a weapon?" The warlord could not answer. Ryan turned and began walking away, the crowd still too stunned to move. The weapon gave a final, faint hum, as though satisfied with what it had done. And in the silence that followed, everyone, soldier, slave, and warlord alike, finally understood. This was not just a weapon. This was the beginning of the end. Asterisk. The counterattack. The silence in the arena felt heavy, almost alive. Dust hung in the air where the warlord had fallen, his massive body still, trembling on the cracked stone floor. His sword lay shattered at his side, his armor nothing more than burnt metal clinging to him. Ryan stood above him, calm, quiet, and holding that strange little weapon. The crowd watched, stunned. They had never seen their champion defeated, not in 1,000 battles. And yet, here he was, kneeling before a human. For a moment, it felt like everything was over. But at WASN T. Far above, one of the alien warships let out a long, low roar. Looked up, the sky darkened as the ship began to descend. Its hull glowed with energy, and long metallic arms unfolded from its sides. Smaller drones shot out, swarming around it like angry wasps. Then another roar came, this time from behind the arena walls. Massive doors slid open, and from the shadows emerged something even worse. It was a mech, towering 3 stories high, made of black steel and covered in glowing symbols. The mech marched forward with heavy, earth-shaking steps. Each step cracked the arena floor further. It carried a cannon on one arm and a blade longer than a bus on the other. Its eyes glowed red, and steam hissed from vents on its shoulders. The crowd found its voice again. They cheered wildly now. The fear they had felt a moment ago faded as they saw the mech. "Bring the Titan," someone shouted from the stands. "Crush him," screamed another. The warlord, though weak and burned, managed to smile faintly through his cracked lips. "You think this is over?" he rasped, his voice full of venom. Ryan didn't look at him. His eyes were on the mech now. Stopped just a few steps away, looming over him like a mountain of death. From above, a voice, sharp, mechanical, cold, echoed across the arena. "Human," it said, "you have broken the rules. Now you face judgment." Ryan tightened his grip on the weapon. "So be it," he said softly. The mech struck first. Its cannon roared to life, shooting a beam of pure energy at Ryan. But Ryan moved faster than anyone expected. He pressed the button, and the beam curved away from him, bending as if the air itself refused to let it touch him. It struck the wall behind him, blasting a hole straight through. The mech swung its giant blade next, cutting down toward him. Ryan rolled forward and aimed the weapon upward. A sharp, focused pulse fired from the device and struck the blade, shattering it in mid-swing. Pieces of the blade rained down like deadly shards, but none touched him. The crowd fell silent again, but the mech didn't stop. Instead, it planted its feet and unleashed a blinding storm of energy blasts, firing rapidly and wildly. The floor cracked, the walls shook, and smoke filled the arena. When the dust settled, the mech searched the ground, but Ryan was gone. Then a voice came from above. "Up here." The mech tilted its head just in time to see Ryan standing on its shoulder. He pressed the button. And everything changed. The weapon hummed louder than ever before. Its glow turned from blue to white, so bright it hurt to look at. Ryan placed the weapon against the mech's neck joint and pressed again. A pulse of energy surged through the entire machine. Its red eyes flickered, then dimmed. Its massive body froze, then began to collapse. The mech fell to its knees, then onto its side, sending a shockwave through the arena as it hit the ground. The crowd gasped, half in fear, half in awe. The warlord's faint smile was gone now. He stared in disbelief at the wreckage of his greatest weapon. But Ryan wasn't finished. Above them, the alien ship began charging its weapons. Blue light gathered at its underside, preparing to fire. Ryan raised his weapon high toward the ship. The glow turned even brighter, brighter than the sun, and then, with a sound like tearing metal and roaring wind, a beam of energy shot upward. Struck the ship square in its center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship cracked open like an egg. Explosions ripped through its hull, and pieces of it rained down, burning into the sea beyond the arena. Smoke curled into the sky, and the sound of alien metal groaning filled the air. The noise faded. Only Ryan was left standing. The mech lay dead at his feet. The warlord lay broken. The ship burned above them, and Ryan, calm, steady, lowered his weapon and let the silence speak for him. The crowd stared in horror now, not just at him, at what he had done. What he still might do. Some began to leave quietly, heads down, no longer laughing or cheering. The warlord crawled forward, blood in his mouth, and whispered, "What are you?" Ryan finally looked down at him and spoke, his voice low but clear. "I'm human." He turned and began to walk away. Again, his weapon glowing faintly, almost as if it was alive. But in the shadows above, far beyond the burning ship, something else was watching. Something bigger. Something older. Something even the warlord feared. And as Ryan left the arena, the shadows began to move. The counterattack had only just begun. Asterisk, the revelation smoke still rose from the ruins of the arena when Ryan stepped into the silent corridor. Beneath it, the cheers and screams of the crowd above had faded into nothing. The air down here was cold and still, lit only by the faint glow of strange alien crystals embedded in the walls. Behind him, the warlord lay broken, his mech destroyed, his army silent. But Ryan knew it wasn't over. Not yet. He walked slowly, his weapon humming faintly in his hand. With each step, memories came back. Memories of the long year in the prison camp, of the nights spent building the weapon in secret, of the first time he pressed that button and saw what it could do. But those weren't the only memories haunting him. There was something else, something no one on Earth, not even Ryan's closest allies, knew at the end of the corridor. He reached a black door. It wasn't a normal door. Pulsed faintly. As though alive, he placed his hand on it, and it opened with a low, mechanical groan. Beyond it was a chamber, unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were covered in strange alien symbols that glowed softly in the dark. The air felt heavier here, and warmer. At the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal column, shimmering with energy. Inside it, something floated, something that looked almost like a star, trapped in glass. Ryan approached slowly, his eyes fixed on it. The weapon in his hand began to glow brighter as he came closer. From the shadows, a voice spoke. "So, you've come at last." Ryan stopped. The voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the air feel thick. A figure stepped forward from the darkness. It was not like the warlord or the soldiers above. It was taller, thinner, and its body was made of black metal and light, as if it was more idea than flesh. Its eyes burned like twin suns. "We have been watching you," it said. Ryan tightened his grip on the weapon. "Then you know what happens next," he replied. The figure tilted its head. "You think you have won," it said softly. "You think. You are free. But you do not even understand what you carry in your hand." Ryan said nothing. The figure gestured toward the crystal column. "This is the source," it continued. "The heart of our power. We took it from your kind eons ago, before you even walked upright. And yet, here you are, holding a piece of it in your fragile hands." Ryan's eyes narrowed. "You're lying," he said. The figure chuckled. A hollow, chilling sound. "The weapon you built," it said, "is not yours. It was never yours. It is a key that opens the stars and also burns them." Ryan glanced at the weapon. For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. "You think you made it," the figure went on. "But it made you." Ryan took a slow breath. He remembered the strange dreams he'd had while building it. The whispers in the night. The way it seemed to guide his hands, almost teaching him how to assemble it. He remembered the way the weapon seemed to hum louder when he was angry, calmer when he was focused. And suddenly, the pieces began to fit. The figure stepped closer, its eyes boring into his double quotes. "Do you know what happens if you press that button again?" It asked. Ryan didn't answer. The figure raised a long, thin hand and pointed to the crystal column. "You will wake it," it said. "You will wake us. And when we wake, your kind will burn brighter and die faster than you can imagine." Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at the weapon in his hand. It glowed brighter now than ever before. And for the first time, it spoke, not aloud, but inside his mind. One word. Press. Ryan took a step toward the crystal. The figure moved suddenly, blocking his path. "You don't understand what you're doing," it hissed. Ryan's expression was calm, but his heart pounded like thunder in his chest. "You're right," he said softly. "I don't." He raised the weapon. The figure lunged at him, but Ryan was faster. He pressed the button. The chamber exploded with light. The walls shook. The air cracked. and the crystal column shattered like thin ice. The star inside it flared, then shot upward, piercing through the ceiling and the sky beyond above. The entire arena split apart as beams of light tore through the alien warships still circling the planet. The figure fell back, its body cracking, its voice rising in a scream that sounded like metal tearing. But Ryan didn't stop. He pressed the button again, and again, and with each press, the light grew stronger, filling the chamber, the arena, the sky, until everything was quiet. When the light faded, Ryan stood alone in the ruined chamber. The figure was gone. The crystal was gone. Walls were nothing but ash and dust. And the weapon no longer glowed. It was silent now. But Ryan could still feel it, not in his hand, but in his mind, and he finally understood. The voice returned, faint but clear. Inside him, you are the weapon. Now, Ryan closed his eyes, letting the silence settle around him. Then he opened them and whispered to himself, "Good." Above him, the stars shimmered faintly, but some of them began to move. And somewhere, far beyond, something even greater had awakened, something that had been waiting for him, and it was coming. The final blow. The stars above were no longer still. Ryan stood in the center of the ruined arena, the broken stones glowing faintly around him. The air was quiet, too quiet, as though the whole galaxy was holding its breath. Above him, far beyond the clouds, the stars twisted and shifted. Entire constellations vanished, swallowed by black shapes moving across the sky. They weren't ships this time. They were something much bigger, much older, something alive. Ryan raised his eyes and watched as they descended. The crowd that once filled the arena had fled. Only ashes and empty seats remained. Even the great warlord was gone, taken away by his soldiers, or perhaps by the shadows now spilling across the earth. Ryan's weapon no longer glowed. It hung silently in his hand, but he could still feel its power, like a storm beneath his skin. A low rumble came from the horizon. The earth shook. The sky cracked open, and from the darkness above it came. It did not walk or fly. It simply appeared. A shape so massive it blocked out half the sky. Its body was made of black light in shifting patterns, its edges too sharp and too strange to fully see. Its many eyes opened, each one larger than a city, and fixed on Ryan. When it spoke, its voice was not a sound, but a feeling that shook his bones. "You have woken us." Ryan stood his ground. "You carry our heart. You stole what was ours. You broke the seal." The shadows stretched further, reaching down toward him, wrapping around the arena like fingers. But Ryan's grip tightened on the weapon. He could feel it pulsing again, faint at first and stronger, as if it too was waking up. "I didn't steal it," he said quietly. "I built it. I earned it." The creature tilted its vast head, its countless eyes narrowing. "You misunderstand. You were chosen. A vessel. Nothing more. Return it to us, and we will spare your kind." Ryan's lips curled into a faint smile. "No," he said simply. Creature's massive form shifted, and for a moment it seemed to cover the entire world. The ground split open around Ryan, glowing with strange runes and heat. From the cracks, more shapes rose, huge, spindly warriors of light and shadow, their forms crackling with power. Dozens of them, and hundreds, each one pointed a blade of pure energy at Ryan. He closed his eyes, feeling the weapon's hum growing louder, the storm building inside him. When he opened his eyes again, they glowed faintly, not just human anymore. He raised the weapon high. The shadows lunged. The first wave struck, and time itself seemed to slow. Ryan pressed the button. A wave of pure light burst out of him, not from the weapon now, but from his own body, The nearest warriors disintegrated instantly, their forms dissolving into dust. The creature above let out a roar, so loud the mountains trembled and the seas rose. The next wave came, even stronger. Ryan ran forward this time, dodging strikes that split the ground behind him, cutting through the shadows with his free hand, while his other hand held the weapon tight. Everywhere he moved, the arena tore apart, stone cracking, towers falling, the air screaming. He pressed the button again, and this time the beam that shot upward was not just light dot, it was. Everything dotted tore through the black shape above, cutting it clean in two. The sky split apart. For a moment, the stars beyond were visible again, and they burned brighter than before. The creature screamed, its form collapsing, its countless eyes dimming one by one. Ryan didn't stop. He stepped onto the broken stones, now glowing white-hot beneath his feet, and pressed the button one final time. The ground erupted beneath him. Energy surged through the cracks, rising into the air, wrapping around his body like armor. For a few seconds, he stood taller than the arena itself, a human silhouette blazing with the light of 1,000 suns. The creature above shrieked and reached for him with its last remaining tendrils, but they burned away before they could touch him. With one final roar, Ryan hurled the weapon upward dotted, flew into the sky, spinning faster and faster, until it became a burning star of its own dot. It struck the creature directly in its center, and everything stopped. Silence. The shadows vanished. The cracks in the earth sealed. The stars returned to their places, and the giant black shape dissolved into nothing. Ryan stood alone again in the center of the ruined arena, his chest rising and falling slowly. The weapon was gone now, but the glow in his eyes remained. He looked at his hands, faintly trembling, and whispered to himself, "It's done." But somewhere, high above the stars, a faint whisper answered, "Him, not yet." He raised his head slowly, and far on the horizon, another light appeared. Not black this time, but golden dot. It was moving toward him. And whatever it was, he knew this was just the beginning. The aftermath, the arena, was nothing but a ruin now, a hollow crater of cracked stone and glowing embers. The alien sky, once full of darkness and stars, now lay quiet above, scattered with faint golden light where the shadows had been torn. Away, Captain Ryan stood at the center, his clothes scorched, his hands glowing faintly as though fire still lived inside him. The weapon was gone, but its memory lingered in the air, in the stones, and most of all, in him. The silence after this battle was strange, not peaceful. Not yet dot. It was a silence that felt like the whole galaxy was watching, waiting to see what he would do next. Ryan's chest rose and fell as he looked around it. What was left? The crowd that had filled the arena hours ago was gone. The stands were shattered, and where thousands of alien soldiers had stood before, now there was nothing but dust. The great warlord lay at the far edge of the crater, barely alive, one arm reaching weakly toward the sky. Ryan walked over to him slowly. The warlord's eyes opened when he sensed Ryan's presence. His body trembled as he tried to speak. "What are you?" he rasped. Ryan knelt beside him, his face calm, his eyes faintly glowing with that same quiet power. "I'm human," he said simply. And for the first time, the warlord did not laugh, only closed his eyes, as though understanding something too late. Above them, the faint golden light on the horizon grew brighter. Ryan stood and looked toward it. The air around him began to shift, warm and strange. The stones beneath his feet hummed softly, and the smell of ozone hung in the air. Something was coming, something even bigger than what he had already faced. A faint voice whispered behind him. It was not his imagination this time. "You opened the door." He spun around, but no one was there. The golden light grew closer. It wasn't just a star. Now he could see it clearly. It was a massive shape, brighter than the sun, but too perfect to look at directly. It was descending slowly, but with purpose, and the closer it came, the heavier the air felt. And then it spoke. The voice was everywhere at once, in the sky, in the ground, inside his mind. You burned the shadows. You shattered the heart. You claimed the key. But the key does not end the story. It begins it. Ryan clenched his fists. He could still feel the weapon inside him somehow, its energy, its knowledge, its whispers. But now he realized it wasn't alone. There was something waiting in the light, 2 from the sky. The golden figure landed softly in the center of the crater. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. A being of pure light, shaped like a man, but so much more. Its eyes were twin suns, and its voice was like a choir of storms. Ryan stood his ground as it approached. "Who are you?" Ryan asked. The figure tilted its head slightly. "We are what comes after." Its gaze swept over the ruins of the arena, the shattered earth, the silent warlord. "You have proven humanity worthy of the key, but the key must now be tested. We will see if you can carry it further, or if you will fall, like all before you." Ryan narrowed his eyes. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked. The figure's light flared brighter, and the ground cracked under Ryan's feet. "You cannot refuse. The path has already begun." Ryan stayed silent for a long moment. Then he took a deep breath and spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Fine," he said. "Then let's finish this." The figure raised its hand, and in an instant, the ruins of the arena rose into the air. Suspended as though weightless. The stones rearranged themselves into strange patterns. Symbols of light appeared across the ground, stretching for miles in every direction. Ryan felt a new kind of energy flooding through him. Heavier, sharper, more dangerous. He knew this wasn't just a test of strength anymore. This was something far bigger. And for the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt since the beginning. Not fear, not anger, but wonder. The figure of light extended its hand toward him, and in its palm appeared a new weapon, not like the one he had built before, but brighter, heavier, alive. Ryan reached out slowly, then stopped just before touching it. He looked up at the figure and asked quietly, "If I take it, what happens next?" The figure leaned closer. "Everything." Ryan closed his hand around the weapon. The light flared so brightly, it swallowed the entire world. And when it faded, he was gone. But in the sky, 2 stars began to move. One dark, one golden, and for the first time in history, the galaxy wondered which of them would win. And in the silence, a faint whisper could still be heard. "You are the weapon now." The end, or the beginning,